Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do.
Oh, hello there. I was just checking on the ships here in the big harbor. You know, we get many, many visitors here, from little fishing boats to giant super tankers. And you know what? I bet I have sailed on every kind of ship there is. Oh, yeah, I've been around ships most of my life. I remember the first time I got my first job aboard a ship. That was really something. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. Oh, God. Long hours and hard work, not to mention trying to stay standing with the waves rolling this way and that way. Oh, but I did. And you know what? Before I knew it, I had spent many happy years at sea. I remember when Theodore got his first job here in the big harbor. It was when he pulled his first ship. You know, he didn't think he was going to be able to do it either. It seemed like Theodore and Hank were always thinking about the day when they'd be able to go to the wide open ocean, beyond the harbor. That's when they'd have their own wonderful V words in bright golden letters, just like Emily the Vigorous, or George the Valiant, or Foduck the Vigilant. And of course, they were also thinking about what their V words might be. Theodore liked valuable, or even very valuable. Hank preferred volcano. Theodore knew it could be a while before either of them had learned enough to be given their own V words. After all, the most important step before being awarded a V was knowing how to pull a ship. Theodore had pulled barges before, and they'd both done practice pulls with Emily, but neither of them had ever pulled any real ships by themselves. It was time for the morning meeting, but none of the other tugs were there. The dispatcher seemed worried. He looked at Hank, then at Theodore, and then back around at the busy harbor. "Let's see," he said. "Emily's still out on the ocean. She's supposed to be back very soon. George is towing Tex, the oil rig, down the coast. Oh, he won't be back for a few days. And Foduck's busy moving ships anchored in the middle of the harbor. Well," he sighed, "that means we have a big problem. We have a cargo ship arriving soon, tugboats," he said. "Her name is Julia, and there just happens to be room for her today at her favorite dock. But with all the V-tugs away," continued the dispatcher, "there's no one to pull her in." "Theodore," whispered Hank. The dispatcher kept looking around as if he hoped Emily would magically appear. "Well," he said, not very happy, "I guess that means tomorrow. I guess tomorrow will be a very busy day, tugboats. That's all for now." Hank whispered again to Theodore. "Theodore, this is our big chance. You and I could bring in that cargo ship." Hank was so excited he was finding it hard to keep his voice down. "Hank," said Theodore, "I'm not a puller. Not yet, anyway." "Well, you want to be one, don't you, Theodore?" replied Hank. "Yes, but," said Theodore. But Hank was still talking. "And the dispatcher said just the other day that you were doing a great job pulling barges. I'm sure he'll let you try it. Come on, Theodore. Ask him. Ask him." "What's all this about?" said the dispatcher suddenly. "Theodore can pull," said Hank. "He's been practicing a lot." The dispatcher turned to Theodore. "Theodore, do you think you're ready to pull?" "Oh, my," thought Theodore. "What's Hank started this time?" So, almost before he knew what had happened, there was Theodore, sailing out to the mouth of the harbor with Hank. Sure enough, they were on their way to meet Julia, the cargo ship. "How does it feel to be the tug in charge?" asked Hank. Theodore still wasn't sure if he knew what to feel. Not very sure at all. "We better think, Theodore," Hank continued. "After this, you'll get your V word for sure. How about voyageur, off to all the seas in the whole wide world? And I'll be Hank the Volcano. Roar," said Hank. But all Theodore could think about was being the tug in charge. Hank was sure there wouldn't be any problems. "You won't be alone, Theodore," he called. "I'll be helping you." Well, for some reason, this made Theodore feel even less sure about the whole thing. "Hank, you forgot to tuck in your anchor again," he said. "That's what Emily and Foduck are always saying," said Hank. "See, Theodore, you're already a great tug in charge." Well, Theodore couldn't help smiling at his friend. Hank just wouldn't give up, would he? "Well," said Theodore, "I guess I should at least try. Maybe it'll be okay. I hope." So off they went again. And again they started thinking of V words. Volcano, Voyager. They knew that this would turn out to be quite a day. The day that Theodore Tugboat would pull his first ship. Soon Theodore and Hank had arrived at the mouth of the harbor, close to the mighty ocean. Julia, the cargo ship, was just arriving. She looked very big. Very, very big. She also looked unfriendly. All of a sudden, Theodore's doubts returned. The huge ship just stared down at him. "Hello," said Theodore. How do you do?" Julia didn't answer. Theodore tried again. "My name is Theodore, and this is my good friend Hank. We're here to take you to your favorite dock." Theodore couldn't think of anything else to say, so he just waited. Finally, Julia said, "Fine. Pushers go to the back." Hank and Theodore looked at each other, and then at Julia again. "Oh, thank you, Julia," said Theodore, who always tried to be very polite. "But I'm your puller today." Well, Julia was not impressed. She thought Theodore was just a little tug. "I've pulled before," said Theodore, trying to make Julia feel better. "And what have you pulled before?" asked Julia. Barges, mostly," replied Theodore. Now, Julia wasn't sure that Theodore could be a puller, but she knew it was important to get the fresh vegetable she was carrying unloaded. And after all, it was her favorite dock that was open today. She looked way down again at the two tugboats. "Well, I suppose I'll have to at least let you two try." "Hooray!" shouted Hank. "But I hope you won't make any mistakes, or I'll have to complain." "Oh, yes, I understand," said Theodore bravely. But inside, he knew that if Julia complained, it was sure to hurt his chances of being given his V word and being able to go out on the ocean. "Let's get to work, Theodore," called Hank. "I'm waiting," said Julia. Theodore started off back into the big harbor. He found he really did like how you could see everything when you were up in front. And he felt very important, leading such a big cargo ship into the big harbor. He even gave a little toot-toot to Hank, just like the tug in charge does to signal, "All clear, carry on." Just then, Pearl the pilot boat arrived to help guide the ship safely to the busiest part of the harbor. But with Pearl there, Theodore began to worry again. He wanted to make sure he did everything just right, and the pilot boats always watched very carefully. After all, that's their job. "Well, Theodore," said Pearl, "your first pull, is it?" "Oh, yes, ma'am," answered Theodore. "Will you arrive on time?" asked Pearl. Theodore looked around. Hank was in position. "Well, everything's fine, I guess. We'll be there in no time," he said. Pearl went to check on Hank. Willie's Island in the middle of the harbor was just coming into view. "You'd better start turning," Julia said to Theodore. The turn, the time, being the tug in charge, there's just so much to remember, Theodore thought. Theodore was getting closer and closer to Willie's Island. "Turn," said Julia again. But this wasn't the way Theodore had practiced with Emily. They always turned a little closer to the island. That was because sometimes other ships were coming around the other way. Theodore knew he had to give them lots of room. "Careful, Theodore, careful," said Pearl. But now, Theodore wasn't sure what he should do. Maybe the others were right. After all, it was only his first pull. The island was getting closer and closer. Theodore knew that Julia would be upset with him for not turning when she wanted him to. But then he remembered. He was the tug in charge. Suddenly, Theodore knew what he had to do. He continued on. Julia was so worried she couldn't say anything. Then, at just the right moment, Theodore gave one quick toot to Hank. That was the signal to turn now. The two tugs began to swing around the island. Much too close, thought Julia. Just as they were rounding the bend, there was a ship heading towards them. Theodore tooted again. Stop turning! And Hank tooted 2 times back to say yes. Well, it's a very good thing Theodore had waited to turn just when he did. The 2 ships passed with just enough room to be safe. If he had turned any sooner, there might have been a terrible collision. Julia was silent. She must be wishing that Emily was here instead of me, thought Theodore sadly, and he moved on. As they went farther and farther, Theodore became sadder and sadder. By now, he was sure he'd never get to be a puller again. That's Emily tooting, thought Theodore. She must be back from her trip. Now she could take over. Oh, that made Theodore feel much better. He looked up at Julia. You know, for a moment back there, Julia said, I thought all my vegetables might become a tossed salad. But you did turn at just the right time after all. You're doing well. I am? Asked Theodore. Suddenly he wasn't so happy about Emily returning. He was just beginning to think he could finish the pulling job. Hi, Theodore, said Emily. When did you get to be a puller? She asked. Just now. I mean, today, Theodore said quietly. He was trying not to let Julia hear him. So he whispered to Emily, It's because there were no V-tugs around. I guess now that you're here, you should be the tug in charge. I think this tugboat is doing a fine job of pulling, said Julia. Well, Emily was very happy for her good friend Theodore. Of course he is, she said. Do you think this will mean I can be a V-tug, Emily? He asked. Someday, laughed Emily, and off she went. That night, Hank and Theodore couldn't stop talking about their big job. And Julia's cargo was very important, Hank was saying. She was carrying carrots and lettuce and bags of broccoli. You know, Theodore, interrupted Emily, if you were to get your V word for your job today, I know just what word it would be. What? Asked Theodore. He knew Emily always could think of such great words. Theodore the Vegetable, laughed Emily. Well, all the other tugs laughed too, and one by one they went off to sleep. All except for Theodore. That night, he stayed awake a little while longer. He couldn't stop thinking about the next time he'd be the tug in charge here in the big harbor. Now, Theodore didn't get his V word for that assignment. No, that was just one small first step for him. The same as me learning to stay standing when the waves are rolling back and forth was a first step for me. It's called getting your sea legs. You learn to move back and forth with the ocean. But once you've got your sea legs, you feel like you can do anything. Well, almost anything. Whoa! Of course, on the ship, we try to remember to keep the door closed. Well, thanks for visiting here in the big harbor. We'll see you all again next time. I've got to clean this up. Oh, what a mess.
Theodore.
There's another story coming right up. And you can always learn more about Theodore Tugboat on the internet. Find us through PBS Online.
Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Foduck, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Oh, hello there. I was just watching the Bluenose. You know, she's one of the most famous sailing ships in the whole world. She's a schooner. That's an old kind of ship. Well, here, I've got a small one here. This is a schooner. They have 2 masts, 1, 2, and they hold the sails up like this. Bluenose is only in the big harbor in the summer months. Then she goes around the harbor and she shows people the sights. And then she kind of slips away to foreign shores. Kind of just drifts out of our minds. But she always comes back. My, she is beautiful. You know, When Theodore first met Bluenose, he couldn't bring himself to speak to her. There was something about her that just made him shy. Foduck didn't feel that way, though. And that is quite a story. It all started one day when our friends Theodore and Foduck were at the great ocean dock, and Bluenose sailed past. "Isn't she beautiful?" said Theodore. "Oh, what use is an old sailing ship?" answered Foduck. Now, as I said, Foduck is much more impressed by new things. "Look at my brand new depth sounder, Theodore," he continued. "It tells me exactly how deep the water is. Now, that's something that's really useful." But Theodore couldn't stop looking at Bluenose, cutting through the water. Ah, she was so slender, so quiet, so smooth. Later that afternoon, Theodore was passing Bluenose's dock when the sailing ship said hello to him. Theodore stopped so quickly that he made a big swirl in the water. Well, that made them both laugh, and they got to talking about all kinds of things. Turned out that Bluenose was lonely. "I always thought someone beautiful like you would have lots of friends," said Theodore. "No," replied Bluenose. "Other ships don't seem to want to talk to me. Maybe it's because I'm different. Or maybe because I'm old. Years ago, before the motor ships came along, there were many, many sailing ships here in the big harbor. But now I'm the only one left," she said sadly. Well, Bluenose and Theodore got to be friends. Theodore liked to ask her what it was like to sail. See, he could hardly imagine being able to move without the deep drumming sound of his engine. "Oh, I'd rather use my sails," said Bluenose with a smile on her voice. "You just lean over with the wind and it pushes you along." "My friend Foduck doesn't think old sails are any good," said Theodore. Now Bluenose thought that was funny. "As long as you've got sails," she said, "you can always get somewhere. The wind will blow sooner or later." Then Theodore decided he would see if he was faster than Bluenose. "1, 2, 3, make way for me," shouted Theodore, and he scooted by Bluenose. Just then the wind puffed up just a little bit, and Bluenose suddenly pulled away from Theodore so fast it made him look like he was standing still. The sailing ship went gliding down the harbor and then turned into the wind with all her sails shaking and sailed back up to Theodore. "Wow!" exclaimed Theodore. "Are you ever fast?" Bluenose smiled. "Don't forget, once I was the fastest ship on the ocean." A few days later, Bluenose had been hauled out of the water for repairs. The dispatcher sent Theodore to tow Bluenose back into the water because he knew they'd become friends. "Hello," called Theodore, but he could see that Bluenose was upset. "What's the matter?" he asked. "They gave me a new radio," said Bluenose. "It's supposed to let me send or hear messages from anywhere. So now you're like a brand new modern ship," said Theodore, trying to make Bluenose feel better. But Bluenose wasn't happy. "We old ships don't need these new things. I was sailing on the high seas before these kinds of radios were even thought of," she said. Then Theodore noticed a big red shape underneath Bluenose's black hull. "Hey, there's more of you under the water than on top of it," he said. Is that something new too?" Bluenose laughed. "No," she replied. "That's as old as I am. The red shape is the secret of sailing." "Help me back into the water, Theodore," said Bluenose, "and I'll show you how it works." It was a warm, sunny afternoon in the big harbor. The kind of afternoon when new friends like to share secrets. "Pretend you're the wind, Theodore," said Bluenose softly, "and I'll show you the secret of sailing. Push my side like you were a powerful wind from the open sea." So Theodore carefully put his front bumpers right against Bluenose's side and pushed really hard. But instead of moving sideways, Bluenose slid straight ahead. Well, Theodore was very surprised. It's the same with the wind, said Bluenose. Even if the wind blows against my side, that red shape that's under the water makes me move straight ahead. I wish I could sail like that, said Theodore. It looks like so much fun. Oh, when the wind is your friend, you probably could a little, answered Bluenose. And then she scooted ahead with the warm summer breeze. Theodore! Hey, Theodore! Theodore could tell Foduck was excited about something. See what I found with my new depth sounder? He said. Theodore noticed the big green and yellow striped cloth on Foduck's deck. It was under the water over in Cobequid Cove. Isn't it great? Theodore nodded. Foduck's new machine could certainly find wonderful things. Come on, Theodore, said Foduck. I'm going to see what else I can find with this new machine. Come with me. Thank you, Foduck, said Theodore, staring back at Bluenose. He could still see her sails dancing with the wind. I think I'll stay here for a while, he said quietly. Well, the next time Theodore saw Bluenose, she seemed to be very sad. My new radio makes too much noise, she said to Theodore. Sailing ships are supposed to be as silent as a sea breeze, continued Bluenose. But with this new radio, I sound like a big storm. You don't have to turn your radio up all the way, said Theodore. Only if you're far away from who you want to talk to. Come on, I'll help you practice. You go over there, he said, and I'll go this way. Can you hear me? Theodore said over his radio. Hello, Theodore, Bluenose radioed back. I hear you. You don't need to shout to be heard, said Theodore. That's what the radio is for. Theodore went farther away and used his radio again. Can you hear me now? Loud and clear, Bluenose said into her radio. That's it, Bluenose, said Theodore. Now I'll go really far away until we can't see each other. We'll still be able to talk. Theodore disappeared behind Willie's Island. Calling Bluenose on the radio. I hear you, Theodore, Bluenose answered back. Now, at just around the same time, Foduck was floating along the shoreline using his brand new depth sounder to measure how deep the water was. 6 fathoms, 5 fathoms, 4, counted Foduck as he circled closer and closer into shore. All of a sudden, he felt something tugging at him from behind, sort of slowing him down. The next thing he knew, he was stopped. The seaweed in the shallow water near the shore had wrapped itself around his propeller, and now he couldn't move anymore. Then he saw Theodore floating towards him. Good old Theodore. But he realized that Theodore would also get stuck if he came too close. Stop, Theodore, Foduck cried. The water's full of weeds. You'll get your propeller tangled like mine. Theodore stopped short. He wanted to help, but he didn't want to get stuck too. However, Foduck did look miserable. Theodore thought and thought about how to get Foduck free. He looked around the harbor. The wind was blowing hard, and that gave Theodore an idea. Maybe he could sail out, he called. Foduck looked puzzled. Sail, he said. Theodore, you know I can't sail. You can use that old green and yellow striped cloth you found, said Theodore. Well, Foduck looked unsure. I guess I could try. Foduck raised that old cloth right up his radar mast, just like a sail. And do you know what? The wind began to push. I'm moving, shouted Foduck. It's working! Foduck, watch where you're going, called Theodore. The wind was blowing Foduck all right, straight toward the rocky shore. Without his propeller, Foduck couldn't stop or turn. Oh, soon he was sure to crash. Was there one ship in the harbor who was fast enough to help stop the runaway tugboat? There was one, thought Theodore. Bluenose. Bluenose heard a call over her radio. It was Theodore, and he was calling for help. By now, Foduck was almost at the shore. Suddenly, there was the sound of great sails flapping in the wind. Theodore watched Bluenose as she raced towards Foduck. Would she get there in time? Bluenose sailed in a graceful arc and came right alongside Foduck. "Turn your sail the other way," she called. Foduck turned his sail the other way, just like Bluenose had suggested. And soon, the wind did the rest. Now it was pushing him away from the shore. And just in time. "Hooray!" shouted Theodore. "Hooray!" shouted Bluenose. "Hooray!" shouted Foduck. "Thank you for saving me," Foduck said to Bluenose. "But how did you know I was in trouble?" "I heard Theodore call for help over my new radio," replied Bluenose. "You know, I guess new things are good for something after all." "You know," said Foduck as the wind pushed him along beside Bluenose, "old things are kind of good too. Can you show me more about sailing the old way?" "Sure," replied Bluenose. "Can you show me more about using my new radio?" Foduck gave Bluenose a hearty toot-toot with his horn. Sure he would. And Bluenose rang her bell to Foduck. Theodore gave his own happy toot-toot as he watched his two friends sail on past. He knew they would both have many, many things to show each other, old and new. You know, there really is no lovelier sight in the big harbor than to see the Bluenose sailing along. I'm glad we have her. You know what? Foduck is too. It seems like the old and the new can help each other more than they thought. Yes, Bluenose is an old ship from days gone by. Long, long ago when folks put to sea with nothing but a sail and the wind to blow them along. Nowadays, though, ships and boats have engines. And for them, that's a good thing. After all, we all saw what can happen when you try and put sails on a tugboat. Well, thanks for visiting us here in the big harbor, and we'll see you all again next time. So long.
Theodore, he's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Foduck, Hank and George and the harbor master too.
PBS Kids!
Excuse me! Excuse me! It would sound much better if we cooperate. 1, 2, a 1, 2.
Ribbit, 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 ribbit.
Tots TV!
Did you know that tots can be lots of things? Let's see what's going on today on Tots TV, next on PBS Kids.
It's time to sneak a peek.
Between the lions, between the shows.
Ready?
Let's go. Today's episode is about the short O sound.
I had a pot. It was heavy with dots. So I dropped it. It made a spot. Oh, how I wish that I had not tried to lift that heavy pot.
Join us next time for more
Between the Lions, Between the Shows.
Gotta go.
Bye.
On PBS Kids.
Hey, want to hear a fun rhyme?
Is it about a Dalmatian?
It's a rhyme about a clam named Sam, who's best friends with a lamb named Pam. Sam said, "Hey Pam, would you like some bread and jam?"
I'd rather have a peanut butter sandwich.
Hey, that doesn't rhyme. Yellow, that was pretty blue.
PBS Kids is made possible by your support of your local PBS station.